Hello and welcome back once again to the Wrestling Group. I'm your host, as always, Ryan, and today we are going to be doing our preview and predictions of AEW Full Gear. So that pay-per-view hits tonight, or if you like me and live in the UK, early hours in the morning tomorrow. But we are going to be doing our predictions, going to let you know what we think of the matches, who we think is going to win. And of course, don't forget you can always play along with us and let me know in the comment section who you think you would pick for each of the matches. Let me know your winners and then we can compare them afterwards. So there are 13 matches so far altogether, 4 being on the pre-show, and then the other 9 on the main card. So let's get into it. So we'll start with match number 1 on the pre-show, and that is Big Boom AJ and QT Marshall, Boom and Doom, versus Roppongi Vice, which is Rocky Romero and Trent Beretta. Probably skip this one, if I'm being honest. I've not watched a single Big Boom AJ match this far, and I don't plan on watching one now. Never been a fan of QT Marshall, can't stand him. Not a big fan of Rocky Romero in the ring. The only one I like in this whole match is Trent Beretta, and it's not enough for me to tune in. They're doing a thing with Big Boom AJ for some reason, so I take it Boom and Doom are going to win. So we'll move on to match number 2, and that is Hook and Eddie Kingston versus the Workhorsemen, which is Anthony Henry and J.D. Drake. In a tag team match together. Obviously, Hook and Eddie have started teaming over the last month or so since Eddie come back. They said their eyes are set on the AEW tag team titles, so I'd expect fully for Hook and Eddie to pick up the victory. You know, the Workhorsemen are pretty much a jobber team in AEW, so I'd expect Hook and Eddie to pick up a victory and start looking at pushing on towards those AEW tag team championships. So up next we have the $200,000 Fatal 4-Way tag team match. The winners will receive $200,000 cash prize. We've got a couple of these matches of late where it's for money. Tony Khan likes to book money matches. You know, it's been all right when the Young Bucks have been doing it because it's played into their storyline. But other than that, it doesn't really mean a lot. So we have Max Caster and Anthony Bones teaming again. You know, Tony Khan's trying to put them back together as the Acclaimed. Neither one of them wants that, but here we are. They are booked again as a tag team. They'll be taking on a Bang Bang Gang members, Austin Gunn and Juice Robinson. They've been teaming together for the last couple of months, been doing really well, and even have a pinfall victory over FTR. Then we have Big Bill and Brian Keefe, who obviously got together under the tutelage of Chris Jericho, and have failed to really pick up much steam after Jericho disappeared off our screens. And then we have the Outrunners, who are probably the most over tag team outside of the tag team champions in AEW. You know, the Outrunners have got a massive following, got really good fans. To be honest with you, it should be the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions. There's no reason why they shouldn't be Ring of Honor Tag Champs. I don't think we needed Sammy and Roosh to become Tag Champs, but there you have it. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not sure which way this one's going to go. You know, we've got obviously, like say, the Outrunners, who are massively over, you know, so them picking up a win would be good for them. Push them on, obviously, to get a tag team title shot in the future. Like say, Austin Gunn and Juice Robinson, they've tag teamed together and they have, like say, a pinfall victory over FTR. So, I mean, we could even see maybe one of the other members return. You know, we could see Colton Gunn return, maybe Jay White. You never know. And then we have obviously the storyline ongoing, Max Caster and Anthony Bones, where they're trying to put them together as a team, although they don't want to be. So there's a couple here that they pick up the victory. You got Big Bill and Brian Keefe. You could get a return of Chris Jericho. Who knows? You know, that could be on the cards. It would be a really great way to stomp out the rumours of him going back to sports entertainment. To be honest, yeah, I'm gonna pick on this one Max Caster and Anthony Bones. I think they're going to continue with the storyline and eventually put the Acclaimed back together as maybe heels. And the storyline's got to be going somewhere, hasn't it? So I'm going to say they pick up the victory here. And then on to the last one of the pre-show, and that is El Sky Team, which is the CMLL World Trios Champions, and Mystico, who obviously we've seen face MJF on a number of occasions. Masca Dorado, who's had a really good showing in most of his matches for AEW, apart from that one this past week. That was not a great one against Okada. And Neon. And they will be taking on Don Callis family members Kazuchika Okada, Kenosuke Takeshita, and Hechicero. Now, we know there's a lot of issues going on between Kazuchika Okada and Takeshita. You know, they had the chance to become AEW Tag Team Champions against Brody, though, at the last pay-per-view, which they didn't. They didn't work well together towards the end and lost that match. I expect exactly the same thing to happen here. I expect Okada and Takeshita can't get along, and El Sky Team retain their titles. Because eventually we're going to get Okada versus Takeshita. I did think it was going to be at Wrestle Kingdom, but obviously that's not going to be the case because Okada is going to be Hiroshi Tanahashi's last opponent, and Takeshita will be facing Yota Tsuji in a global championship and world championship, both belts on the line match. So I'm going to say El Sky Team retain their titles. That is the pre-show. So up next, we look at the main card. So we have the inaugural AEW National Champion being crowned in a casino gauntlet match. I'm pretty sure there's not many. Is there many? There's not many participants announced. I know that Shelton Benjamin's obviously announced, Bobby Lashley's announced. I'm pretty sure both members of Jet Speed were announced as well. Ricochet's in there. I think they're the only ones off the top of my head that I can remember definitely in the match. Because obviously Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin are going to be participants 1 and 2. So I'm really interested to watch them throw down. I hope they do mix it up until the next entrants come out. This is a great opportunity for a returning. If you're having a return, you know, you've got so many that are still ready to return at some point. You know, Jay White's been out for a long time now, although Tony did say it's looking at 2026 for his return. We've got Swerve. I don't think there was much update on Swerve after the was it knee surgery? Ospreay, he's had neck surgery, seems to be doing quite well. Although he did say he was aiming for January, February. Could we see him return this early? Who knows? Like I say, Colton Gunn's still out injured. We haven't seen Keith Lee in about 3 years. You know, there's so many people that could return. I hope that they do a big return during this match. It would be quite cool. But I'm really, really interested to see Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin throw down. And to be honest with you, if I've got to take a pick out of the ones that we know about, so obviously it's Mike Bailey, Ricochet, Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, Kevin Knight. If I'm picking a winner out of the ones we already know, then I'd pick Shelton Benjamin for the simple fact that is, like, Shelton Benjamin is a phenomenal athlete and should at least hold a singles title in AEW at some point. But there's that many that aren't announced. It could end up being anyone. Like, it's like you could have members of the Death Riders in there. You know, Claudio could be in there. Wheeler, Danny. You know, there's just so many people that aren't in matches that could easily be used here. And like say, it could be a big return. Like, I'd love to see Jay White return and win. I don't think MJF returns here because I think, you know, he's got that World Championship match in his back pocket at some point. So I think we'll see him return maybe later on. But yeah, I reckon we're going to get a big surprise. And do you know what? I'm just going to say Shelton Benjamin, because for me to be able to pick someone when we don't even know who's going to be involved is quite a hard one. So I'm going to go Shelton Benjamin for that one. Let me know who you think is going to return, or if there is going to be a return. And of course, let me know who you think is going to win that match. So we'll move on next to Kyle Fletcher and Mark Briscoe. They are facing again for the AEW TNT Championship. This is going to be a no disqualification match, and if Briscoe loses, he'll be forced to join the Don Callis family. So at the moment, we have Kyle Fletcher leading this. They have had 5 singles matches beforehand. Kyle Fletcher has 3 wins, and Mark Briscoe has 2. So a number of things in this one, a lot of people saying this is going to be Mark's time now to finally pick up a AEW championship, because obviously he's been Ring of Honor World Champion twice under the AEW banner, but not actually held an AEW championship. So, there's a lot of people thinking that he's not going to join the Don Callis family because obviously he's got conglomeration. The fact that it's no DQ, both factions probably be expected to be involved somewhere down the line. But to be honest with you, like Kyle Fletcher said this week, that if he wins, then he will have the most defenses as TNT champion. I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, like, don't quote me on this, but feel free to let me know if I'm wrong. Cody Rhodes is the one that holds that record, which is obviously, I think, in his very first run as the TNT champion. Obviously, like I say, if I'm wrong, let me know, but I think it is Cody. So it'd be nice to see Kyle set that record, as it's been a record that's been around for a couple of years now. And of course, Kyle Fletcher is a future world heavyweight champion, which I don't think Mark Briscoe is. And coming out of it at the end as well, is the storyline is more... I think the storyline would be better to see Mark Briscoe forced to join the Don Callis family. It'd be sort of like similar to like when John Cena was forced to join Nexus, or when Daniel Bryan was forced to join the Wyatt family, that type of thing, which I think we could get a really good storyline out of it if it's done right. If Mark goes over, then we're going to get Kyle versus Mark yet again. And then, I don't know, then Don Callis just going to run the gauntlet with all of his guys to see if someone can take the belt off him. I don't know where they go if Kyle wins. If Mark wins. He'll get the TNT championship, but where'd you go after that? Don Callis family obviously aren't just going to then leave him alone, are they? So I'm going to pick Kyle Fletcher, retains his championship, he breaks the record, and also forces Mark Briscoe to join the Don Callis family. So up next, we're going to look at the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match. The winning team will choose the stipulation for their semi-finals match in the inaugural AEW Women's World Tag Team Championship Tournament. That was a mouthful. So we have the Babes of Wrath, which is Willow Nightingale and Harley Cameron. They are facing the Sisters of Sin, which is Julia Hart and Sky Blue. They will face against Timeless Love Bombs, which is Timeless Tony Storm and Mina Shirakawa. And they will face the only team without a name, Megan Bayne and Marina Shafir. So obviously all these women were involved in the first ever women's blood and guts match as well. So you've got to imagine whoever picks up the victory is probably going to pick some sort of hardcore match. No DQ, hardcore, no holds barred, that sort of thing. I don't think, to be honest with you, it really matters any of these that does win. Not necessarily mean that they're going to then go on and win their match. I mean, we've seen it with Jamie Hayter and Queen Aminati. They won the match earlier, didn't they? And then when they picked their opponents, they then ended up losing to them opponents. So it doesn't necessarily always give you the upper hand. And like I said, I pretty much think no matter which team it is, it's going to be a hardcore match of some sort, because they've literally just done the hardcore blood and guts match. So I'm going to keep it with, I was going to say the favourites. The favourites for me is Timeless Tony Storm and Mina. But you know what? I'm going to go with Megan Bayne and Marina Shafir. I think they pick up the victory here, and they get to pick stipulation to face the Timeless Love Bombs. And it'll be a hardcore match of some sort. So I'm going to go with Megan Bayne and Marina Shafir. So move on from that. Next up, we have Darby Allin versus Pac in a normal singles match. Pac made it perfectly clear this week during promo that Darby will have none of his advantages, his tricks, if you like, of being able to use like hardcore stipulations and stuff like that. It's going to be a straight up wrestling match, because Pac says he is the better athlete and he wants to prove that by facing Darby in a singles match. Darby had an ongoing story with Mox, and then he's moved around facing different members of the Death Riders as Mox has now gone on with a story with Kyle. It's another hard one for me to pick here because Darby obviously is coming off a really big storyline where he's beaten John Moxley, he's made Mox tap out. Then they got into the War Games, and yes, he wasn't involved in the finish, but his side wins, and then goes against Pac. Now, for me, if you beat John Moxley, really, you should then be beating Pac because Mox is obviously the leader of the Death Riders. But there is that niggling thought in the back of your head that John Moxley's time with the Death Riders soon will come to an end. And I've got a feeling that it's going to be Pac the Bastard to take over as the new leader. So, do you know what? Based on that, I'm saying Pac gets the victory over Darby Allin and then lead us into the no-holds-barred match against John Moxley and Kyle O'Reilly. And you know what? I'm actually going to say Kyle O'Reilly picks up the victory yet again against John Moxley, which then forces the Death Riders to come out, eject John Moxley from the Death Riders, and instate Pac as the new leader of the Death Riders, because Pac would, of course, pick up the victory against Darby Allin, something that John Moxley wasn't able to do in the last match that they had. And then Mox obviously loses against Kyle O'Reilly. Again, he's been on a losing streak at the minute. So the thing is with a losing streak is eventually by the fans you'll be turned babyface, won't you? So I think that is the next step, is John Moxley goes away for a bit and then comes back and has a babyface run. So yeah, I'm going to say Pac beats Darby and Kyle O'Reilly beats Mox. Now I need to remember where I'm up to now in the matches. I'm just on back to back. Right, we'll move on next to the 6-man tag match. We have the trios match, which is for $1 million. That's supposed to be the biggest cash pot of a match has been in history, which is $1 million. So the winning team will take that home. We have Kenny Omega and Jurassic Express, and they will be taking on the Young Bucks and Josh Alexander. Obviously, the storyline in this one again is Don Callis trying to get the Young Bucks to join the faction. By the end of the night, we could have the Young Bucks joined and we could have Mark Briscoe joined. It's just expanding literally week on week, isn't it? It's a decent story, to be fair. Kenny and the Bucks have been at odds for a while now. Obviously after they kicked them out of the Elite and done the heel version of the Elite with Okada, and obviously Jack Perry at the time. And then we've had the storyline of since Jurassic Express come back, they faced off against the Bucks. And obviously then we've had Josh Alexander desperate to get his hands on Kenny Omega. So for me, I think with this one, I think Kenny and Jurassic Express pick up the victory. I think Don Callis' family then attacks Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks make the save. So then we're going to get Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks as the Elite once again. So that is what I'm going with there. Kenny and Jurassic Express pick up the victory. And we'll go on to the next tag team match, which is for the tag team championships, the AEW World Tag Team Championships. It's a Bandido. They've been a phenomenal, fantastic team since teaming together. Obviously, for me, Bandido's probably been, if not one of, he's the wrestler of the year. He's just not had a bad match. He's gone and had absolute bangers with everyone. He's had some fantastic matches as the Ring of Honor World Champion, as well as fantastic matches teaming with Brody King. And they are going to be taking on FTR, who are one of the greatest tag teams in the history of professional wrestling. and having a really good run at the minute as heels. They are classing themselves as living legends, and they seem to be attacking any legends that get in their way. We've seen them recently go after Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Would have been Ric Flair as well, but obviously he couldn't make that spot. Pretty simple for this one for me. I think FTR pick up the victory and the AEW Tag Team Championships, and then afterwards we get a returning Adam Copeland and Christian Cage. We get Cope and Cage versus FTR for the AEW Tag Team Championships at the next pay-per-view. That's what I'm going with there. I think Brody, though, have done excellent stuff for the tag division. You know, they've made a lot of tag teams that have been around for a while, stepped the game up. I think they've been a phenomenal pairing. At first, it felt very random, obviously. I knew that they were friends, didn't know how close they were and how long they've been very good friends for. So, and we've been able to see that story grow with them, and as they've become more comfortable with each other as a tag team. They've been a fantastic team, but I think FTR pick up the victory so that they can face Cope and Cage for the AEW tag team titles at the next pay-per-view. Next, we move on to Chris Statlander, the AEW Women's World Champion, and she will be facing 13 belts, Mercedes Moné. Obviously, the only one that really matters in AEW's books is the TBS Championship. So we have the AEW Women's World Champion and the TBS Champion facing against each other. Now, the only issue with that is it limits us to how many women's matches we have on the pay-per-view, which is a shame. Obviously, we've got the multi-women one, because obviously they're pushing the tag division at the minute. So we've got that match. But then there's only 2 women's matches on the whole entire card. We would have at least had 3 if Mercedes wasn't tied up. So this is the thing. So this is what makes me think Chris is going to pick up the victory. One is they faced twice before, and Mercedes has beat her both times. That was for the TBS Championship last year. And I also think they don't want to tie up. I know, obviously, she's got a shitload of titles at the minute, but most of them are independent titles and have no effect on AEW at all. I'd be very surprised if Tony Khan wants to tie up his only 2 AEW singles women's championships with the one wrestler. And Chris Statlander's not long won the belt. She won it, and then she defended it successfully against Tony Storm. But Mercedes has only lost 1 match in AEW. In a singles match, which was against Tony Storm. But it would make better for the storyline if Mercedes, the only 2 losses she has in singles matches, are both been for the AEW Women's World Championship. It means when she eventually does win it, it's going to mean so much more, and it won't just be yet another title. My only problem, obviously, is if Mercedes doesn't pick up the victory, then where do they go from here in terms of what's she going to do with all these titles? Because she's not going to be pinned 13 times. So, like, my thing is, if she wins the AEW Women's World Championship, would she then vacate all the other titles and just keep that one? I'm not too sure, but I don't know. Do you know what? I'm going to back Chris Statlander on this. I think Chris is going to pick up the victory. And to be honest, Chris deserves it. She deserves to have the belt for a few months. She's been here from day one. She's consistently good in the ring. She just needs to flesh out that character a little bit more, and hopefully she'll get the opportunity to do it with the World Championship. So we move on next to the last match, the main event of the evening, and it is Hangman Adam Page versus Samoa Joe for the AEW Men's World Heavyweight Championship in a steel cage match. So the last time we seen Hangman in a steel cage match was against Swerve Strickland, who, of course, Hangman drank the blood of and then spat in the air. So don't be surprised if this one ends up being more bloody and gory than what the blood and guts match ended up being. Samoa Joe's got good history in the steel cage as well. You know, if you go way back to his NXT days, he defeated the Demon Finn Balor inside of a steel cage for the NXT Championship. So, you know, Samoa Joe has good form too. in steel cage matches. For me, for this one, I think it's going to be a great match. It'll be a great main event. The last match was really good. This probably going to be a lot better. It's going to be a steel cage match for one. I think Hangman picks up the victory, retains the AEW World Championship, and then we get a return of MJF, who takes the hanger out and sets his sights on the AEW World Championship, considering he has that match in his back pocket. He just has to give us a week's notice. Well, if he wants to challenge for it at the next pay-per-view, this is plenty of time. So there you have it. That is my predictions for AEW Full Gear tonight. Feel free to let me know your predictions in the comments section below. And as always, please don't forget to like, drop us a comment, and of course, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the Wrestling Group today.